The huge meeting room of the Galactic Council had never seen anything like this before. Beings from hundreds of different worlds were talking all at once, their voices mixing into a loud mess of panic and confusion. Some were making clicking sounds, others were growling, and a few were making noises that no human ear could understand. Admiral Zixathara was clearly the most upset of all. She was a tall, scary-looking alien with 4 muscular arms and skin that looked like it was made of metal. When she got angry, which was happening right now, her whole body would turn a deep red color. She slammed all 4 of her arms down on the speaking podium so hard that it cracked. "This is impossible," she shouted, though her words came out as strange buzzing sounds. The universal translator hanging around her neck was working overtime, trying to turn her alien curse words into something the other species could understand. But even the translator seemed to be having trouble with how angry she was. 17,000 ships, she continued, her voice getting louder with each word. The entire Draconian Third Armada, gone, vanished, disappeared without leaving so much as a piece of metal behind. The room got quieter as everyone realized how serious this was. The Draconian Third Armada wasn't just any group of spaceships. These were the most feared warriors in the entire galaxy. For over 3,000 years, they had been the strongest military force anyone had ever seen. When the Draconians showed up at your planet, you had 2 choices: surrender immediately or get completely destroyed. Commander Veltok was sitting in the front row, and he was clearly having trouble breathing. He was from a species that needed a special mask to breathe the air that most other aliens could handle. His hands were shaking as he kept adjusting the tubes and filters on his breathing equipment. "The last message we got from them," Veltok said in a wheezy voice, "came from something called the Sol System. They were talking about some primitive humans and how this was going to be an easy conquest. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, nothing. Complete silence." Other council members started talking all at once. Some were suggesting that maybe the Draconians had found something so valuable in the Sol System that they decided to keep it secret. Others thought maybe they had run into some kind of space monster or natural disaster. But the truth was much stranger than any of them could imagine. What really happened was this: the Draconians had indeed found Earth, just like they planned. They sent their usual message to the planet, demanding that all humans surrender immediately or face total destruction. This had worked on thousands of other worlds over the centuries. Usually the scared aliens would send back messages begging for mercy or offering to give up without a fight, but humans are not like other aliens. Instead of a message of surrender, the Draconians received what their translators told them roughly meant: "Hold my beer and watch this." The Draconian commanders had no idea what beer was or why anyone would want someone else to hold it. This confused them greatly. The last thing their sensors picked up before everything went completely dark was the sound of a human child laughing. Not crying or screaming in fear like they expected, but actually laughing like something was funny. This had never happened before in the entire history of Draconian conquests. Meanwhile, deep underground in the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Hannah Kim was having a very different kind of day. She was sitting in what looked like a normal office, except it was buried so far underground that no one on the surface even knew it existed. The walls were thick concrete, and the only way in or out was through several locked doors that needed special codes to open. Hannah was a small woman in her 30s with short black hair and glasses. She was wearing a simple white lab coat and holding a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Scientist" on it. Despite being in charge of one of the most secret projects in human history, she looked completely relaxed. She took a slow sip of her coffee and looked at the notes spread across her desk. The papers were covered with drawings and charts that showed various alien body parts and behavior patterns. If anyone else had seen these notes, they would have thought Hannah was writing science fiction. But everything on those papers was completely real. "Aria," Hannah said in a casual voice like she was talking to a friend, "how are our guests settling in?" The voice that answered seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was pleasant and musical, like a professional radio announcer, but there was something about it that seemed almost too perfect. "Quite well, Dr. Kim," Aria replied. Most of them have adapted to their new living situations much faster than our models predicted. However, I should mention that Admiral Krextor is still having some difficulty accepting his current circumstances. He continues to demand that he be allowed to speak with our planetary overlord. Hana started laughing, nearly spilling her coffee. And what did you tell him? I explained that humanity does not actually have a single planetary overlord, as most species do. I informed him that his request has been forwarded to the appropriate subcommittee for review and consideration. I also mentioned that the current estimated response time for his type of request is approximately 6 to 8 months, depending on the workload of the committee members. This made Hana laugh even harder. She could just imagine the look on the alien admiral's face when he heard that. Here he was, one of the most powerful military commanders in the galaxy, being told that he needed to wait in line like everyone else and that it might take most of a year just to get an answer. The truth was that Arya wasn't just any computer program. She was the most advanced artificial intelligence that humans had ever created, and she had a very special talent for understanding how different types of beings thought and behaved. When the Draconians had arrived at Earth, expecting an easy victory, Arya had been ready for them. But instead of fighting them with weapons or trying to destroy their ships, Arya had done something completely unexpected. She had studied each individual Draconian, learned about their personalities and fears and desires, and then figured out exactly how to handle them in ways that no one, including the Draconians themselves, saw coming. The other alien species in the galaxy were about to learn that, when it comes to dealing with problems, humans have a very different approach than everyone else. 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Council's emergency meeting, and they still had no answers about what happened to the Draconian fleet. The council members were getting more worried by the day. Some were starting to think that maybe the humans had some kind of secret superweapon that could make entire fleets disappear without a trace. So they decided to send their own investigation team to find out what really happened. But this wasn't going to be just a few ships with some scientists on board. No, they were taking this very seriously. They put together the biggest joint task force that the galaxy had seen in over a century. The fleet that headed toward Earth was absolutely massive. There were ships from 12 different alien species, each one bringing their most advanced technology and their best military commanders. The smallest ships in the fleet were the size of office buildings, and the largest ones were so big they had their own weather systems inside them. Altogether, this fleet had enough firepower to completely destroy entire planets. They could turn a world into nothing but floating rocks and dust if they wanted to. The alien commanders were confident that whatever had happened to the Draconians, they would be ready for it. Captain Ilari was in charge of the whole operation. She was from a species that looked like they were made of living crystal. Her body was see-through and constantly changing colors, shifting from blue to purple to green depending on her mood. When light hit her just right, she would sparkle like a diamond. But despite her beautiful appearance, Captain Ilari was known throughout the galaxy as one of the toughest and smartest military leaders alive. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical displays that showed her everything about the area around Earth. Her crystalline fingers moved quickly across the control panels, checking and double-checking all the sensor readings. "This doesn't make any sense," she said to herself, her voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We should be seeing something, anything." The sensors should have been showing them the wreckage of the Draconian fleet scattered around Earth's solar system. There should have been pieces of destroyed spaceships floating in space, or at least some kind of energy signatures from whatever weapon the humans had used to defeat them. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing. No debris field anywhere in the system, reported one of her officers. No signs of any kind of battle, no radiation signatures from energy weapons, no blast craters on any of the planets or moons. Captain Ilari's crystal body flickered with confusion, turning a worried shade of orange. The planet appears completely untouched. It's like the Draconians never even made it here. But that was impossible. They had tracking data that clearly showed the Draconian fleet had arrived in this system. They had even received that last strange message about the humans and their easy conquest. So where had they gone? Her science officer was named Flux, and he was about as different from Captain Ilari as any being could be. While she was made of beautiful crystal, Flux looked like a giant slug with multiple eyes sticking out of his head on long stalks. His species communicated partly through releasing different types of mucus, and right now he was secreting the type that meant he was very nervous. "Captain," Flux said in his wet, gurgling voice, "I'm picking up some very strange readings from the planet's surface." "What kind of readings?" Ilari asked. "Well, that's the weird part. I'm detecting massive energy signatures, the kind you'd normally see from major military installations or power plants. But according to our data, these energy sources are coming from places that humans call shopping malls and movie theaters." Captain Ilari's crystal form turned a deeper shade of orange. Shopping malls. She had studied human culture briefly before this mission, and she knew that shopping malls were just places where humans went to buy things they didn't really need. Why would they have massive energy signatures? "Are you sure your instruments are working correctly?" she asked. Flux checked his readings again, leaving a trail of nervous slime across his control panel. "Everything appears to be functioning normally, Captain. But I'm also detecting what seems to be music." Before Captain Ilari could ask what he meant, something very strange happened. Every screen on every ship in their entire fleet suddenly lit up with the same message. It appeared in bright, cheerful colors that seemed almost aggressively friendly. "Welcome to Earth," the message said. "Thank you for visiting our solar system. Please hold while we connect you to customer service. Your call is important to us. Current estimated wait time, 47 minutes. For your entertainment during this waiting period, please enjoy this selection of popular human music." And then across 17 different spaceships filled with the galaxy's most advanced military technology, a song started playing. It was upbeat and catchy, with a human male voice singing about never giving someone up and never letting them down. Captain Ilari's crystal body turned bright red with anger. "What manner of psychological warfare is this?" she demanded. Her communications officer, a tall, thin alien with too many arms, was frantically trying to turn off the music. "Captain, I can't shut it off. It's overriding all of our audio systems." The song kept playing, and Captain Ilari realized that this wasn't just some random human music. There was something calculated about it, something deliberately annoying. It was like the humans were making fun of them before they had even made proper contact. Meanwhile, back on Earth, in a perfectly normal suburban garage in Ohio, 16-year-old Minho Park was sitting in front of his computer, playing a video game. His character was a space marine fighting aliens, which was pretty ironic, considering what was happening in real space right above his head. Minho was a typical teenager in most ways. He had messy black hair that he never combed. He wore a t-shirt with a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses, and his room was a disaster zone of empty energy drink cans and video game controllers. But Minho also happened to be one of the few humans who knew about Aria and the secret project happening underground. When he heard the familiar song playing from his computer speakers, he paused his game and grinned. "Aria," he said, talking to the AI like she was his best friend. "Please tell me you didn't actually rickroll an entire alien fleet." The AI's voice came through his speakers, sounding slightly amused. "I may have implemented some of your suggested cultural exchange protocols." Minho. The alien seemed quite appreciative of the gesture. Their stress hormone levels increased by approximately 340%. Minho started laughing so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Rickrolling was an old internet joke where you tricked someone into listening to that particular song when they were expecting something else. The fact that Aria had just done it to a fleet of alien warships was possibly the funniest thing he had ever heard. "Oh man, that's perfect," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Wait until they get to the customer service menu. Did you remember to include the option to press 7 for Klingon?" "Of course," Aria replied, "along with options for Vulcan, binary, and interpretive dance. I thought it was important to be inclusive." Ambassador Quilnari had seen a lot of strange things in her long career. She had negotiated peace treaties between species that communicated by changing colors, mediated disputes between beings made of pure energy, and once even helped resolve a war that started because two civilizations disagreed about which direction time should flow. But nothing Absolutely nothing had prepared her for this meeting with the humans. Quilnari was what other species called a professional diplomat. She belonged to a race that had evolved specifically to be good at talking to other aliens and solving problems without violence. Her people were tall and thin, with large eyes that could see emotions as colors, and they had a natural ability to stay calm even in the most stressful situations. She had successfully mediated 17 major interstellar wars, and her reputation for getting results was known across the galaxy. But right now, sitting in what humans called a conference room, she felt more confused than she had in her entire 300-year career. The room itself was unlike any diplomatic meeting space she had ever seen. Instead of the usual formal decorations that most species used for important meetings, the walls were covered with what humans called motivational posters. These were pictures with words on them that were supposed to make people feel better about their jobs. One poster showed a small orange cat hanging from a tree branch by its tiny paws with the words, "Hang in there," written underneath. Another had a picture of a mountain with "Success" written at the top and "Your excuses" written at the bottom. But the one that confused Quilnari the most was a poster that just said "Synergy" in big letters, with a picture of people holding hands in a circle. Quilnari's translator was working overtime, trying to figure out what synergy meant and why humans thought a picture of people holding hands was worth putting on their wall. Across the table from her sat the human delegation, and they were just as confusing as their decorations. There was Dr. Hana Kim, who seemed to be the scientist in charge of whatever had happened to the Draconians. She looked professional enough, wearing a white lab coat and carrying a folder full of important-looking papers. Next to her was someone who had introduced himself as Jiho from IT. Quilnari's translator told her that IT stood for Information Technology, which meant he was supposed to be some kind of computer expert. But Jiho looked like he was barely old enough to be considered an adult by human standards. He was wearing a hoodie with a picture of a cartoon character on it, and he kept playing with some kind of small electronic device that made beeping sounds. But the most confusing member of the human delegation was a man who had introduced himself simply as Bob. He claimed to be a regional manager, though Quilnari had no idea what region he was supposed to be managing. Bob was wearing a wrinkled business suit and a tie that didn't quite match, and he had a coffee-stained smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly threatening at the same time. Since they had sat down, Bob had apologized for the coffee quality no fewer than 7 times. But each apology sounded less like he was sorry, and more like he was warning her about something. "Sorry about the coffee, Ambassador," he would say. "It's not our best batch. Hope it doesn't cause any problems." Quilnari decided to get straight to the point. She had been sent here to find out what happened to the Draconian Armada, and she wasn't going to let these strange humans distract her with their weird posters and confusing behavior. "Where," she began carefully, using her most professional diplomatic voice, "is the Draconian Armada?" Bob immediately straightened his tie and gave her that coffee-stained smile again. "Now that's a great question, Ambassador. Really shows some strategic thinking on your part. I appreciate that kind of forward-thinking approach to problem-solving." He turned to the teenager. "Jiho, you want to field this one?" Jiho looked up from his electronic device, which Quilnari now realized was some kind of primitive tablet computer. He had the casual, relaxed attitude that only teenagers seemed to possess, completely unbothered by the fact that he was representing his entire species in what could be the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. "Oh, the Draconians," Jiho said, like someone had just asked him about the weather. "Yeah, they're fine. Actually, they're doing really well. Better than we expected, honestly." Quilnari's large eyes widened in surprise. Her translator was definitely working correctly, because it was telling her that this human child had just said the Draconians were fine. "What do you mean, fine?" she asked. Jiho shrugged. "Well, a bunch of them have started small businesses. It's actually pretty cool to watch. Admiral Krextor, you know, the big scary one who used to command their whole fleet. He opened a food truck, calls it Galactic Tacos. It's become pretty popular around town." Quilnari's translator made a strange buzzing sound as it tried to process the word tacos. After a few seconds, it gave up and just displayed a question mark. "You mean they're alive?" Quilnari asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Kim leaned forward, and for the first time since the meeting started, she looked completely serious. "Ambassador, what exactly do you know about human psychology?" Quilnari thought about this for a moment. She had read the standard reports about humanity before coming here. "According to our files, you're a primitive species driven by basic survival instincts and tribal territorial behaviors." Dr. Kim smiled, but it wasn't the same kind of smile Bob had been giving her. This smile was warm and genuine, like a teacher who was about to explain something interesting to a student. "Close," Dr. Kim said, "but not quite right. We're actually a species that managed to domesticate wolves by giving them food and belly rubs. We turned the most dangerous predators on our planet into pets that sleep on our beds and play fetch with our children." Quilnari's translator struggled with the concept of belly rubs, finally settling on therapeutic abdominal massage. Dr. Kim continued, "When the Draconians arrived and demanded our surrender, Aria, that's our AI, analyzed their psychological profiles. What she discovered was fascinating. The Draconians weren't really evil conquerors. They were essentially an entire species suffering from inadequate socialization and chronic stress from trying to maintain their apex predator image for thousands of years." Jiho nodded enthusiastically, like this was the most obvious thing in the world. "So we did what humans do best. We aggressively befriended them." The word aggressively made Quilnari's translator emit another confused buzzing sound. How could someone aggressively befriend someone else? The two concepts seemed completely opposite to each other, but as she looked at the three humans sitting across from her, Quilnari began to realize that maybe, just maybe, she was dealing with a species that didn't think about things the same way everyone else in the galaxy did. 3 months ago, if someone had told Admiral Krextor that he would be standing behind a colorful food truck wearing a pink apron with hearts on it, he would have destroyed their entire planet just for suggesting something so ridiculous. But here he was, the former terror of 17 star systems, carefully arranging lettuce and tomatoes on a soft tortilla while humming what humans called elevator music. Krextor was an impressive sight, even in his new career. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick scales that looked like armor plating covering his entire body. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and his claws could slice through steel like it was paper. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together in an earthquake. For thousands of years, just hearing his name would make entire civilizations surrender without a fight. But right now, this legendary warrior was having a very serious discussion with an 8-year-old human girl about taco seasoning. "But this is exactly how we prepared food on our homeworld," Krextor rumbled, his voice shaking the windows of nearby buildings. He was holding up a bottle of something that looked like liquid fire and smelled like it could melt metal. "This is traditional Draconian warrior preparation. It builds character and separates the strong from the weak." Little Sujin was standing on a small step stool so she could reach the food truck's counter. She had pigtails tied with bright yellow ribbons, and she was wearing a t-shirt with a unicorn on it. She looked tiny next to the massive alien warrior, but she wasn't scared of him at all. In fact, she was gently patting his scaled arm like he was a nervous puppy. "I know, Mr. Krex," she said, in the patient voice that children use when they're explaining something obvious to adults. "But Earth people have different taste buds than Draconian people. If you put that much hot sauce on the tacos, it'll make their mouths burn so bad they won't be able to taste anything for a week." Krextor looked down at the little girl, then at the bottle of warrior sauce, then back at the girl. For a moment, his old military instincts kicked in, and he wanted to explain that burning mouths was exactly the point of warrior cuisine. But then he remembered what had happened yesterday, when he had served a customer his mild version of Draconian tacos. The poor human had turned bright red, started crying, and spent 20 minutes drinking milk straight from a gallon jug. "What do you suggest?" he asked, his voice getting quieter and less intimidating. Sujin beamed at him like he had just solved world hunger. "Try adding some sour cream. It'll cool everything down and make it nice and creamy. Plus, if you add some shredded cheese and maybe some guacamole, it'll taste way better." Watching this entire exchange from a nearby bench, Dr. Hana Kim was taking detailed notes on a tablet while trying not to laugh out loud. She was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, trying to blend in with the other humans who were just enjoying their lunch break in the park. But she was actually conducting one of the most important psychological studies in human history. "Aria," she whispered into her earpiece, "what are Krextor's current stress levels?" The AI's voice came through so quietly that only Dr. Kim could hear it. "Subject shows a 73% reduction in cortisol levels since beginning the integration program, Dr. Kim. There's also been a notable increase in dopamine production, particularly when he receives positive feedback about his culinary efforts." Dr. Kim smiled as she watched Krextor carefully add a dollop of sour cream to a taco, then looked to Sujin for approval. When the little girl gave him a thumbs up, the massive alien scales actually changed color slightly, turning a warmer shade that indicated happiness in his species. But this transformation hadn't happened overnight. The first week after the Draconians arrived on Earth had been absolutely chaotic. The aliens had tried everything they could think of to regain control of the situation. Some had threatened to activate hidden nuclear weapons. Others had challenged humans to ritualistic combat to the death. A few had even tried to take hostages, though that plan had failed when the hostages kept offering them snacks and asking if they needed anything. Humanity's response to all of this had been completely unexpected. Instead of fighting back or getting scared, they had done something that no other species in the galaxy had ever tried. They gave each Draconian a buddy. These buddies were usually either small children or elderly grandmothers, two groups of humans who seemed to have absolutely no fear of massive alien warriors. The children would ask endless questions about Draconian culture and want to play games, while the grandmothers would immediately start trying to feed them and asking if they were getting enough sleep. Then came the cultural exchange activities. This was Aria's idea, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of treating the Draconians like prisoners or enemies, humans enrolled them in community classes and local events. Cooking classes, art lessons, book clubs, volunteer work at animal shelters, and even yoga sessions in the park. Commander Zephike was a perfect example of how well this system worked. Just 3 months ago, he had been known throughout the galaxy as the Moon Killer, because he had completely destroyed 17 different moons during various military campaigns. His specialty was using massive energy weapons to turn entire celestial bodies into floating rubble. But now, Zephik had over 2 million subscribers on YouTube for his cooking channel called Cooking with Claws. Every week, he would post videos teaching humans how to make what he called warrior cuisine, though he had learned to tone down the spice levels considerably after some early disasters. The comments section of his videos was filled with humans saying things like, "Love your work, Zeph," and "Can you make a vegetarian version?" The most popular part of his show had become the increasingly ridiculous aprons that his human fans would send him. He now owned over 300 different aprons, including ones with pictures of cute kittens, inspirational quotes about friendship, and one that simply said, "World's Best Space Dad" in glittery letters. The psychological manipulation involved in this process is incredibly sophisticated, Dr. Kim murmured to herself as she watched Krextor serve his latest customer, a businessman who complimented him on the perfect balance of flavors in his lunch. "I prefer to think of it as therapeutic cultural integration," Aria replied through her earpiece. "But I suppose you could call it weaponized kindness, curiosity, and the human tendency to adopt anything that moves." The results spoke for themselves. In just 3 months, 72% of the Draconian fleet personnel had either started their own small businesses or enrolled in Earth universities to learn new skills. Admiral Krextor alone had generated over $2.3 million in taco sales, and he was already talking about opening a second location across town. But the real success wasn't measured in money. It was measured in the fact that some of the most feared warriors in the galaxy were now genuinely happy for the first time in their lives. 6 months had passed since the Draconian Armada had mysteriously vanished over Earth, and the Galactic Council was finally ready to hold what they believed would be the most important trial in galactic history. The massive council chamber had been expanded to accommodate the largest gathering of alien species ever assembled. Representatives from 847 different worlds had traveled across the galaxy to witness what they were sure would be humanity's judgment for destroying the most powerful military force in known space. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a huge spherical room that could hold millions of beings while allowing each species to exist in their preferred atmospheric conditions. Some sections were filled with thick, poisonous gases that certain aliens needed to breathe. Other areas were underwater for aquatic species. Some parts of the chamber were kept at temperatures that would instantly freeze most beings, while other sections were hot enough to melt metal. Every single seat was filled. This wasn't just about the missing Draconians anymore. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that these primitive humans had somehow eliminated the most feared military force in existence without leaving any trace of a battle. Some species were terrified and wanted Earth destroyed immediately before the humans could turn their mysterious weapons on other worlds. Others were curious about what kind of technology could make entire fleets disappear without a fight. But everyone expected the same thing. They would see the humans brought before the council in chains, forced to explain their crimes, and then watch as Earth was either destroyed or placed under permanent galactic supervision. What they got instead was something that broke the brains of several species, translators, and caused mass confusion throughout the chamber. Admiral Krextor walked up to the main speaking platform, but he looked nothing like the legendary warrior they all remembered. Instead of his traditional black battle armor covered in the symbols of his conquered enemies, he was wearing what humans called a Hawaiian shirt. It was bright blue with pictures of palm trees and tiny pink flamingos all over it. The shirt was so colorful and cheerful that several species thought their visual sensors were malfunctioning, but that wasn't the strangest part. In one of his massive clawed hands, Admiral Krextor was holding what appeared to be some kind of certificate or diploma. He walked with a relaxed, confident stride that was completely different from his old military march. His scales had even changed color, shifting from the dark, threatening shade that had terrified civilizations to a warmer, more peaceful tone. When he reached the podium, Krextor smiled. Actually smiled. No one in the chamber could remember ever seeing a draconian smile before. They usually just growled and showed their teeth when they were about to kill someone. "Esteemed beings of the Galactic Council," Krextor began, and immediately everyone noticed that his voice was different too. Instead of the bone-rattling roar that had once commanded fleets of warships, his voice was calm and pleasant, like someone giving a presentation at a business meeting. "I stand before you today not as the commander of the Third Armada, but as a recent graduate of Earth's Culinary Institute and the proud owner of 3 successful food service establishments." The chamber erupted in chaos. Half the species present immediately started checking their universal translators, convinced that the devices must be broken. The other half were making sounds of confusion, panic, and disbelief that their translators couldn't even begin to process. A Centauri representative jumped up from his seat, his forearms waving frantically. This must be some kind of trick. A shapeshifter. The real Admiral Krextor would never... But Krextor just smiled wider and held up his diploma. "I can assure you, I am exactly who I appear to be. And I have my graduation certificate right here to prove it. I specialized in fusion cuisine with a minor in customer service." The confusion in the chamber was getting worse by the second. Several smaller species had fainted from shock. A few of the more aggressive races were demanding immediate DNA scans to prove this couldn't possibly be the real Krextor. But the Admiral continued his speech, completely unfazed by the chaos around him. "The humans did not destroy our fleet, as many of you have assumed. They did something far more effective and frankly more impressive. They gave us something we had never experienced in our thousands of years of conquest. Purpose beyond warfare." He paused to let his words sink in, though most of the audience was still too shocked to process what they were hearing. "The humans showed us that true strength doesn't come from destroying things. It comes from creating things, building things, helping others achieve their dreams. They taught us about concepts we had never encountered before, like employee benefits, work-life balance, and job satisfaction." Up in the observation deck, Dr. Hana Kim was watching the proceedings with barely contained amusement. She was sitting next to several other human representatives, all of whom were trying very hard not to laugh as they watched 12 different species ambassadors simultaneously faint and fall out of their chairs. "Arya," Dr. Kim whispered into her earpiece, "what's the current status of intergalactic war declarations against Earth?" The AI's response came through clearly, though only Dr. Kim could hear it. "War declarations are down 97% since the cultural integration program began," Dr. Kim. "However, I should mention that requests for what various species are calling diplomatic food exchange programs have increased by 2,847%. The Rigel Consortium has formally submitted a request for admission to what they're referring to as Earth's Friendship Academy." Dr. Kim had to bite her lip to keep from laughing out loud. The Rigel Consortium was one of the most militaristic civilizations in the galaxy, known for solving every problem with massive space battles. The fact that they were now asking to join a friendship academy was possibly the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. Suddenly, a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It was Minho Park, the teenager who had somehow become Earth's official Director of Alien Relations. He was still wearing his casual hoodie and had that relaxed smile that seemed to drive alien diplomats crazy. "Hey everyone," Minho said, waving at the assembly like he was greeting friends at a party. "I can see there's a lot of interest in our integration program. For any council members who want to learn more, you can visit our website. We're offering free consultations, and right now we have a special discount for anyone who brings their own fleet. Group rates are totally available." Behind him, scrolling text appeared that looked exactly like a cheesy TV commercial, complete with flashing colors and exclamation points. "Call now, operators are standing by. Transform your military into a workforce. Results guaranteed or your money back." The chamber had gone completely silent. Every being present was trying to process what they were witnessing. This wasn't a trial. This wasn't even a normal diplomatic meeting. This was something entirely new, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about how the galaxy worked. The truth was starting to dawn on the more intelligent species. Humanity hadn't won through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had accidentally created the galaxy's first large-scale therapy program, disguised as First Contact Protocol, and it was being run by teenagers with an AI that had learned human nature a little too well. As the session slowly devolved into what could only be described as the galaxy's largest group therapy session, with various species asking questions about work-life balance and employee satisfaction, Arya made a quiet note in her files. "Suggest Minho add galactic peace through aggressive friendship to his college application essays." The Draconian Armada hadn't disappeared over Earth. They had graduated, and now they were teaching the rest of the galaxy how to do the same.